Ilhan Omar thought she could embarrass Ted Cruz by attacking his Canadian birth in a Senate hearing. She forgot one critical detail. Ted Cruz isn't a politician playing political games. He's a constitutional lawyer who argued before the Supreme Court 9 times. When Omar called him a Canadian con artist and questioned his loyalty to America, Cruz smiled. Not a friendly smile. The smile of a prosecutor who just got the perfect opening. Thank you for questioning my loyalty, Congresswoman. Now, let me question yours. He opened a folder containing bank records. While you served on the Foreign Affairs Committee, you received $250,000 from foreign government-funded organizations, organizations based in Qatar, organizations tied to Turkey, organizations with connections to the Muslim Brotherhood. You voted to support their interests. You failed to disclose the payments for 3 years, and you never registered as a foreign agent as required by federal law. So, when you talk about loyalty, Congresswoman, whose interests were you serving? Minnesota's or the foreign entities paying you? The room erupted. Smash that subscribe button, because you're about to watch the most devastating legal cross-examination in congressional history. This Supreme Court advocate, the man who clerked for Chief Justice Rehnquist and won the U.S. National Debating Championship, just produced documentary evidence that could send a sitting congresswoman to federal prison. Ted Cruz has been preparing for this moment for months. He's investigated Omar's financial disclosures, her amended tax returns, her voting record. He's identified a pattern that looks exactly like the foreign influence operation that sent Senator Bob Menendez to prison. You see, Omar thought her squad allies would protect her. She thought attacking Cruz's citizenship would make her the victim. She thought progressive activism could overcome evidence. She was catastrophically wrong. When you attack a constitutional lawyer who argued before the Supreme Court, someone who knows every federal statute, every ethics rule, every requirement of the Foreign Agents Registration Act, you better have clean hands. Omar's hands, covered in foreign money she failed to disclose for 3 years. This is bigger than one congresswoman's corruption. This is the day America saw what happens when foreign governments successfully compromise a member of Congress, and a Supreme Court advocate exposes it with documents. This is the day an activist met a prosecutor who had the receipts. Let's go. The Senate Judiciary Committee hearing room had an unusual tension. It wasn't every day a House member was called to testify before a Senate committee. But these weren't normal times. 6 months after Senator Bob Menendez was convicted of accepting gold bars and cash from foreign governments, the Senate Judiciary Committee was investigating foreign influence operations targeting Congress. And Representative Ilhan Omar had been subpoenaed, not because she was accused of crimes yet, but because her removal from the House Foreign Affairs Committee and her controversial foreign policy positions made her relevant to the inquiry. Omar didn't want to be there. She'd spent 2 weeks on social media attacking the hearing as Islamophobic and xenophobic. Her squad allies rallied to her defense, but the subpoena was valid. She had to appear. Senator Ted Cruz sat at the committee D's reviewing documents. As a senior Republican member, he'd been investigating patterns of foreign influence for months, and Omar's financial disclosures had caught his attention. Amended tax returns filed quietly, late disclosure forms, consulting income from entities with suspicious backgrounds, votes that consistently aligned with specific foreign interests. Cruz wasn't sure yet if it was corruption or just incompetence, but he'd prepared for both because Ted Cruz didn't do anything halfway. When he argued before the Supreme Court, he prepared for months. When he debated, he studied every angle. And when he conducted cross-examination, he went for the kill. If Omar wanted to make this personal, he was ready. Ilhan Omar walked into the Senate hearing room like she was walking into battle. Black headscarf, fierce expression, squad members flanking her as a show of solidarity. Progressive activists packed the gallery, wearing "We Stand with Ilhan" shirts. She'd been preparing for this for weeks, not by reviewing her financial records or consulting with ethics lawyers, but by crafting the perfect social media narrative: Republican witch hunt, Islamophobic attack. They can't handle a strong Muslim woman. Every angle calculated for maximum victim status and fundraising potential. Omar had perfected this playbook over 6 years. Get attacked by Republicans, position yourself as the victim of bigotry, raise millions from progressive donors. It worked against Trump. It worked against McCarthy. Why wouldn't it work against Cruz? But she'd made a critical miscalculation. Trump and McCarthy were politicians playing politics. Ted Cruz was a constitutional lawyer who'd argued before the Supreme Court. He didn't traffic in sound bites. He trafficked in evidence. And when Omar's team decided their best strategy was to attack Cruz's Canadian birth and question his real loyalty to America, they handed him the perfect opening. Because nothing makes a lawyer angrier than hypocrisy. And Omar questioning someone else's loyalty while potentially taking foreign money, that was grade A Supreme Court-level hypocrisy. Cruz would dismantle it methodically, not with emotion, not with rhetoric, but with documents, bank records, tax returns, FARA registration databases, vote records, the kind of evidence that holds up in federal court. Ted Cruz looked almost relaxed at the committee table, but anyone who knew him understood this was his apex predator mode, the calm before systematic destruction. Cruz had clerked for Chief Justice Rehnquist. He'd argued before the Supreme Court 9 times, cases involving constitutional law, state sovereignty, Second Amendment rights. He'd won the U.S. National Debating Championship. He'd been named National Speaker of the Year. His Harvard law classmates called him off the charts, brilliant and unwilling to yield or compromise. And his signature move in card games, shoot the moon, the riskiest, most aggressive strategy. And today, he was going all in. In front of him were 5 folders. 1, Omar's amended tax returns showing previously undisclosed income. 2, bank records showing wire transfers from foreign entities. 3, FARA database showing no registration as foreign agent. 4, her voting record on legislation affecting those entities. 5, emails discussing consulting arrangements. Every document obtained legally through Congressional Oversight Authority and public records requests. Nothing classified, nothing illegal, just a paper trail that told a very concerning story. Cruz wasn't sure if Omar had committed federal crimes, but he was certain she'd violated Senate ethics rules, House disclosure requirements, and possibly FARA. More importantly, he was certain she'd attacked the wrong person. Because when a Supreme Court advocate conducts cross-examination with documentary evidence, you don't walk away unscathed. You get destroyed. Chairman Durbin gave the hearing to order. The Senate Judiciary Committee will come to order. Today's hearing examines foreign influence operations targeting members of Congress. In light of the recent conviction of former Senator Mendez for accepting bribes from foreign governments, this committee has a duty to examine potential vulnerabilities in our ethics and disclosure systems. We've invited Representative Omar to provide testimony about her experience serving on the House Foreign Affairs Committee and her understanding of foreign influence operations. Durbin's tone was neutral, but the subtext was clear. Omar's removal from that committee and her controversial foreign policy positions made her relevant. Omar's opening statement was predictably defiant. Mr. Chairman, thank you for inviting me, though I question whether this invitation was truly voluntary given the subpoena. I want to be clear. This hearing is part of a pattern of targeting Muslim members of Congress. Since I arrived in Congress, I've faced constant attacks questioning my loyalty, my faith, and my patriotism. I'm here today because I refuse to be intimidated. I will continue to speak truth to power, even when that makes people uncomfortable. She looked directly at Ted Cruz. Some on this committee have built careers attacking immigrants and questioning whether people born outside the U.S. can truly be loyal Americans. A clear shot at Cruz's Canadian birth. So, I find it rich that I'm here being questioned about foreign influence when members of this very committee have taken millions from foreign lobbies and dual loyalty concerns are only raised when it's about Muslims. Cruz didn't react, just took notes. "Congresswoman Omar," Cruz finally said, his voice calm, "I just want to clarify something for the record. You just referenced members of this committee taking money from foreign lobbies and questioned our loyalty. Were you referring to me specifically?" Omar didn't back down. "If the shoe fits, Senator. You were born in Canada. You didn't renounce your Canadian citizenship until 2014. You've taken millions from foreign interests. So yes, I question whether you understand what real American loyalty means." It was perfectly calculated to make Cruz look defensive, to make his Canadian birth the story, to position Omar as the brave truth-teller. The room waited for Cruz's angry response, but Ted Cruz was smiling. Not a friendly smile, the smile of a Supreme Court advocate who just got the exact opening he needed. "Thank you for that clarification, Congresswoman. Your questioning of my loyalty and my citizenship gives me standing to explore similar questions about your conduct." He reached for the first folder. "Let's discuss the $250,000 in undisclosed payments you received from foreign entities, shall we?" Ted Cruz opened the folder deliberately, every movement calculated for maximum impact. "Congresswoman Omar, you served on the House Foreign Affairs Committee from January 2019 until February 2023, correct?" "Yes, until Republicans removed me in a partisan vote." "We'll get to that. During those 4 years, you voted on legislation affecting Qatar, Turkey, and several other Middle Eastern nations, correct?" "I voted on lots of legislation. That's my job." "Indeed, it is. Now, let's look at your financial disclosure forms for those same years." Cruz held up official House documents. "These are your required annual financial disclosures. Members of Congress must report all income over $200, including consulting fees, speaking fees, and payments from any source. You're familiar with these requirements, of course." "Good. Now, in 2019, you reported congressional salary and some book royalties. Nothing unusual. 2020, same thing. Congressional salary, some royalties, similar pattern." Cruz paused. But then something interesting happened. In March 2024, you filed amended financial disclosures for 2019, 2020, and 2021. He held up the amended forms. These amendments added previously unreported income totaling $247,500. That's $250,000, Congresswoman. Income you failed to report for 3 years until you quietly amended the forms last year. Omar tried to interrupt. "My accountant made an error." "Please don't interrupt, Congresswoman. You'll have time to explain." Cruz pulled out bank records. "I have here bank records obtained through Congressional Oversight Authority. They show wire transfers to your personal account from several entities. December 2019, $45,000 from Doha Policy Institute. March 2020, $37,500 from Mediterranean Research Center. August 2020, $40,000 from Justice and Development Foundation. June 2021, $55,000 from Atlantic Bridge Alliance. November 2021, $70,000 from Global Understanding Initiative. Total $247,500, exactly matching your amended disclosures. Cruz looked directly at Omar. Congresswoman, can you explain what services you provided to these organizations that warranted $250,000 in payments? Omar shifted in her seat. Those were legitimate speaking fees and policy consultations. I'm allowed to earn income outside Congress. You are, Cruz agreed, but you're required to disclose it. You didn't for 3 years. But more concerning is who these entities are. Let's examine them. Cruz pulled out detailed research reports. The Doha Policy Institute, based in Qatar. Primary funding from Qatari government. Focus: advocacy for Qatar's foreign policy interests. Mediterranean Research Center, Turkish government-backed think tank. Advocates for Erdogan regime positions. Justice and Development Foundation, named after Turkey's ruling AK party. Multiple board members with ties to Muslim Brotherhood. Atlantic Bridge Alliance, registered in Luxembourg. Funding sources unclear. Advocates against U.S. sanctions on various Middle Eastern regimes. Global Understanding Initiative, another Qatar-funded entity, promotes opposition to Saudi Arabia and UAE policies. Cruz let that sink in. So, in summary, Congresswoman, while serving on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, you received $250,000 from organizations funded by or tied to foreign governments, governments whose policies you voted to support in Congress. And you didn't disclose any of it until 3 years later when someone started asking questions. Does that accurately summarize the situation? Omar's lawyer whispered urgently in her ear. Senator Cruz, these were legitimate consulting arrangements. My lawyer approved them. I corrected the disclosure error when it was discovered. Cruz smiled coldly. Your lawyer approved payments from foreign government-funded entities while you sat on Foreign Affairs Committee. Interesting. Let's examine the timing of your discovery, shall we? Congresswoman, you mentioned discovering an error. Let's examine the timeline. Cruz pulled out a detailed chronology. December 2019, first payment received. Required disclosure, May 2020, you filed no disclosure. March 2020, second payment, required disclosure, May 2020, you filed no disclosure. August 2020, third payment, required disclosure, May 2021, you filed no disclosure. June 2021, fourth payment, required disclosure. May 2022, you filed no disclosure. November 2021, fifth payment, required disclosure. May 2022, you filed no disclosure. So we have 5 separate disclosure deadlines you missed. That's not one error. That's a pattern. Now, when did you suddenly discover this error and file amendments? March 2024, 3 full years after the first payment. 2 years after the last payment. What happened in March 2024 that triggered this sudden discovery, Congresswoman? Omar hesitated. Cruz didn't wait for an answer. Let me help you remember. In February 2024, this committee announced we were launching an investigation into foreign influence operations following the Menendez conviction. In early March 2024, we sent document preservation notices to several members of Congress. You filed your amendments 3 days after receiving that notice. So, you didn't discover an error, Congresswoman. You amended your disclosures when you learned we were investigating. That's not correcting a mistake. That's covering your tracks. Cruz leaned forward. Here's what concerns me. You took $250,000 from foreign government-funded entities. You failed to disclose it for 3 years, and you only corrected the record when you learned investigators were coming. That's not an accountant's error. That's concealment. But the payments themselves are only the first problem. Let me show you what you did for that money. Cruz opened the 4th folder, her voting record. Let's examine how you voted on legislation affecting the very entities that paid you. In July 2020, there was a resolution condemning Qatar's support for terrorist organizations. You voted no. one of only 17 members to oppose it. Qatar's Doha Policy Institute had paid you $45,000 6 months earlier. In September 2020, legislation to sanction Turkey for purchasing Russian weapon systems. You voted no, one of only 11 members opposed. Turkey's Mediterranean Research Center had paid you $37,500 that same month. And in March 2021, resolution expressing concern about Turkey's human rights record. You voted no. The Justice and Development Foundation tied to Turkey's ruling party would pay you $40,000 3 months later. In November 2021, legislation supporting sanctions on organizations tied to Muslim Brotherhood. You voted no. The Global Understanding Initiative, which advocates Brotherhood positions, paid you $70,000 that exact same month. Cruz spread out the documents. Congresswoman, you received $250,000 from foreign government entities, and you voted exactly as those entities would want on every single piece of relevant legislation. That's not representing Minnesota's interests. That's representing the interests of whoever is paying you. But it gets worse, because you were required by federal law to register for this activity, and you didn't. Congresswoman, are you familiar with the Foreign Agents Registration Act? Generally, yes. Let me be more specific. FARA requires anyone who acts as an agent of a foreign principal to register with the Department of Justice. This includes anyone who, Cruz read from the statute, engages in political activities for or in the interests of a foreign principal, acts in a public relations capacity for a foreign principal, solicits or dispenses anything of value within the United States for a foreign principal. The law is very clear. If you're working on behalf of foreign interests and receiving payment, you must register. Failure to register is a federal felony. Do you understand that requirement? Yes, but it doesn't apply to me. I was a member of Congress. Actually, Cruz interrupted, members of Congress are not exempt from FARA. The exemption is for activities within official congressional duties. He pulled out a legal analysis. Your official duties include voting on legislation, constituent services, and committee work. Your official duties do not include consulting for foreign government-funded think tanks. When you provided policy consultation to the Doha Policy Institute, a Qatari government entity, that was not your official congressional duty. When you gave speeches for payment to Turkish government-backed organizations, that was not your official duty. Those were private activities for payment for entities acting as foreign principals. Under FARA, you were required to register as a foreign agent. Cruz held up a Department of Justice database search. I had my staff search the DOJ's FARA database. Would you like to know how many registrations we found in your name? Omar was silent. 0. Not one registration. So you took $250,000 from foreign government-funded entities. You provided consulting services to them, and you failed to register as the law requires. That's a violation of 22 U.S.C. Section 612, a felony punishable by up to 5 years in federal prison. Do you understand the seriousness of this, Congresswoman? Perhaps you're familiar with Paul Manafort, Trump's campaign chairman. Correct. In 2018, he was convicted of multiple federal crimes, among them failure to register as a foreign agent under FARA. Manafort had received millions from pro-Russian Ukrainian politicians. He provided political consulting services. He failed to register. The Department of Justice prosecuted him. He was convicted. He served prison time. Cruz pulled out the Manafort indictment. The indictment charged that Manafort knowingly and willfully engaged in a systematic scheme to hide income and evade taxes, and that he acted as an unregistered agent of foreign principals. Does any of this sound familiar? You received payments from foreign government entities. You provided consulting services to them. You failed to register under FARA. You hid the income by not disclosing it. You only revealed it when investigators started asking questions. The parallels to Manafort are striking. Omar's lawyer was frantically writing notes. Senator, Representative Omar's situation is completely different. How is it different? Cruz cut him off. Both involved payments from foreign entities. Both involved failure to register under FARA. Both involved concealment of income. Both involved providing services to foreign principals. The only difference I can see is that Manafort was a campaign consultant, and Omar was a sitting member of Congress. If anything, that makes Omar's conduct more serious, not less. She had a higher duty to disclose. She was voting on legislation affecting the very entities paying her. Paul Manafort went to prison. Why shouldn't Ilhan Omar? Let me be very specific about what the law requires, Congresswoman. Cruz displayed FARA regulations on the committee screen. Under 22 U.S.C. Section 611C, a foreign principal includes a government of a foreign country and a foreign political party. The Doha Policy Institute is funded by the Qatari government. That makes it a foreign principal. Mediterranean Research Center is funded by the Turkish government. That makes it a foreign principal. Under the statute, an agent of a foreign principal includes anyone who acts as an agent, representative, or attorney for a foreign principal at the order, request, or under the direction of a foreign principal who engages in political activities for or in the interests of such foreign principal. You provided policy consulting to these organizations. That's acting as an agent. You did it for payment. That's at the request of the foreign principal. Your consulting involved foreign policy matters that affected their government's interests. That's political activities. Under 22 U.S.C. Section 612, anyone meeting this definition must register with the Attorney General within 10 days. The registration statement must include the identity of the foreign principal, the nature of the relationship, a comprehensive statement of the nature of registrant's activities. Cruz held up the blank search result from DOJ. You never registered. Not within 10 days. Not within 10 months. Not within 10 years. You are still not registered. Failure to register is a crime under 22 U.S.C. Section 618. Any person who willfully violates any provision of this subchapter shall be guilty of a felony and upon conviction shall be punished by a fine of not more than $10,000 or imprisonment for not more than 5 years or both. Congresswoman, you've admitted to receiving payments from foreign government entities. You've admitted to providing consulting services. You haven't registered. By your own admissions, you've violated FARA. The question isn't whether you broke the law. The question is whether the Department of Justice will prosecute. Let's return to your voting record, Congresswoman, because the pattern is damning. Cruz opened a comprehensive analysis. I had my staff compile every vote you cast that related to the foreign entities that paid you. The correlation is remarkable. Qatar paid you $45,000 in December 2019. Let's look at Qatar-related votes after that payment. January 2020, resolution praising Qatar's mediation efforts. You voted yes. March 2020, amendment to increase oversight of Qatar's Al Jazeera network. You voted no. July 2020, resolution condemning Qatar's support for designated terrorist organizations. You voted no. September 2020, amendment to condition aid to Qatar on human rights improvements. You voted no. 4 votes, 4 positions exactly aligned with Qatari government interests. Turkey paid you $77,500 across 2020 and 2021. Your Turkey votes, September 2020 sanctions on Turkey for S-400 missile purchase from Russia. You voted no. October 2020, resolution recognizing Armenian genocide. You voted present, refusing to condemn Turkey. March 2021, resolution expressing concern about Turkey's human rights record. You voted no. May 2021, amendment to condition military aid to Turkey. You voted no. August 2021, resolution supporting sanctions on Turkish officials. You voted no. 5 votes, 5 positions perfectly aligned with Erdogan regime interests. Cruz looked up from the documents. Congresswoman, you want to know what's interesting? Before these payments, your voting record on these issues was more mixed. In 2019, before the payments started, you voted yes on a resolution condemning Qatar's blockade of neighboring countries. In early 2019, you co-sponsored legislation critical of Turkish military operations. But after the money started flowing, your votes changed consistently, predictably. You voted exactly as the entities paying you would want every single time. That's not representing your constituents. That's not independent foreign policy analysis. That's voting as directed by whoever is paying you. Now, let me show you something even more concerning. Cruz pulled out email printouts obtained through congressional oversight. These are emails between you and representatives of these organizations, obtained legally through document requests. March 2020, email from Mediterranean Research Center to your office. We appreciate the Congresswoman's continued support on Turkey matters and look forward to her participation in our upcoming policy briefing. That email was sent 2 weeks before they paid you $37,500. June 2021, email from Atlantic Bridge Alliance. Thank you for the Congresswoman's helpful intervention on the sanctions amendment. As discussed, we will process the agreed consulting fee. 2 weeks later, $55,000 payment. October 2021, email from Global Understanding Initiative. We hope the Congresswoman will find our recent engagement mutually beneficial. We have prepared the agreed compensation as outlined in our conversation. November 2021, $70,000 payment. Cruz spread the emails out. These aren't just payments for speeches, Congresswoman. These are payments tied directly to your votes and your advocacy. That's quid pro quo. They paid you. You voted as they wanted. They paid you more. That's not consulting. That's bribery. Let's discuss why you were really removed from the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Congresswoman. Cruz pulled out the February 2023 House vote records. In February 2023, the House voted 218 to 201 to remove you from Foreign Affairs. The official reason cited was your history of controversial statements about Israel. But I don't think that was the real reason. I think Republicans knew something was wrong with your foreign policy positions. They couldn't prove it yet, but they knew. Cruz held up a timeline. Look at the timing. You received your last payment $70,000 from Global Understanding Initiative in November 2021. In January 2022, the first ethics complaints were filed questioning your financial disclosures. By November 2022, multiple Republican members were raising concerns about your foreign policy votes and potential conflicts of interest. In January 2023, new Republican House leadership took over. In February 2023, they removed you from Foreign Affairs Committee. Officially, it was about your Israel statements, but I think they were protecting national security. Because, Congresswoman, you had demonstrated that your foreign policy positions were for sale. They couldn't prove it publicly yet. The evidence wasn't complete, but they knew you couldn't be trusted with America's foreign policy, so they removed you. Cruz leaned forward. And you know what happened after your removal? The payments stopped. November 2021. Last payment from foreign entities. February 2023. Removed from committee. March 2023 through present. 0 foreign consulting payments. Why did the payments stop, Congresswoman? Because you were no longer useful to them. You couldn't influence foreign policy anymore. You had no committee assignment relevant to their interests. So they stopped paying. That tells us everything. These weren't legitimate consulting arrangements. They were payments for access and influence. When you lost your influence, you lost your payments. That's textbook corruption. Now, let's discuss what you claimed in your defense. Cruz pulled out Omar's public statements. After your removal from Foreign Affairs, you gave multiple interviews. Let me read some quotes. CNN, February 2023. This is about Republicans not wanting a Muslim woman who speaks truth about Palestine on the committee. MSNBC, February 2023. I'm being punished for my willingness to challenge the status quo on human rights. The Guardian, March 2023. They removed me because they can't handle someone who puts human rights over political expediency. Beautiful rhetoric, Congresswoman. You positioned yourself as a martyr for justice, but now we know the truth. You weren't removed for speaking truth to power. You were removed because you were taking money from foreign governments and voting as they directed. You were removed because Republicans suspected you were compromised. They were right. Cruz pulled out one more document. This is a letter from then-Speaker McCarthy to the House Ethics Committee dated January 2023. He wrote, I have received credible information suggesting potential conflicts of interest regarding Representative Omar's foreign policy positions and outside income. I respectfully request the committee investigate these matters. McCarthy couldn't prove anything publicly, but he knew something was wrong, so he referred it to Ethics Committee and removed you from the committee where you could do damage. That wasn't political persecution, Congresswoman. That was protecting national security from someone who'd been compromised by foreign money. Ted Cruz put down his documents and looked directly at Ilhan Omar. Congresswoman, you started this hearing by questioning my loyalty to America because I was born in Canada. You implied that my birthplace somehow compromised my commitment to this country. So, let me tell you about loyalty. Cruz's voice was calm but intense. My father, Rafael Cruz, was born in Cuba. He was imprisoned and tortured by the Bautista regime when he was a teenager. He fought for freedom. He was beaten. He nearly died. When he finally escaped Cuba in 1957, he came to America with nothing. $100 sewn into his underwear. No English, no connections, no guarantee of anything. He came here because America represented something his homeland didn't. Freedom, opportunity, the rule of law. He arrived in Texas and worked washing dishes for 50 cents an hour. He learned English. He put himself through the University of Texas. He started a business. He built a life. Taught me something fundamental. American citizenship is precious. It's not about where you were born. It's about what you believe and how you serve. I was born in Canada because my parents were working in the oil industry. When I was 4, we moved to Texas. I grew up in Houston. I'm as Texan as anyone. I studied at Princeton and Harvard Law. I clerked for Chief Justice Rehnquist. I served as Solicitor General of Texas. I've argued before the Supreme Court 9 times defending American constitutional principles. I've spent my entire adult life defending this country's constitution and laws. Cruz's voice rose slightly. So, when you, someone who took $250,000 from foreign governments while voting to support their interests, question my loyalty, let me ask you, who were you serving? Were you serving the people of Minnesota's 5th District, the constituents who elected you? Or were you serving the Qatari government that paid you $45,000? Were you serving American foreign policy interests? Or were you serving the Turkish regime that paid you $77,500? Were you serving American national security? Or were you serving the Muslim Brotherhood-connected organizations that paid you $70,000? Don't talk to me about loyalty, Congresswoman. My loyalty to America is demonstrated by decades of public service defending the Constitution. Your loyalty is demonstrated by your bank account. You took foreign money. You voted as they directed. You hid the payments until caught. That's not American patriotism. That's foreign influence. You mentioned dual loyalty concerns, Congresswoman. You implied they're only raised against Muslims. Let me be very clear. This isn't about your religion. This isn't about your background. This isn't about being Muslim or being an immigrant. This is about money. Foreign money. Money you took from foreign governments while voting on their interests. When Senator Mendez, a Catholic born in America, took gold bars from Egypt, we prosecuted him. He's going to prison. When Paul Manafort, a white Christian born in America, took money from Ukraine and failed to register under FARA, we prosecuted him. He went to prison. This isn't about targeting Muslims. This is about enforcing the law equally. You violated FARA. You violated House disclosure rules. You took foreign money and voted as directed. Those are crimes. They're crimes regardless of your religion, your background, or your identity. Cruz held up the evidence folders. You can try to make this about Islamophobia. You can try to claim victimhood. You can try to hide behind your squad allies. But you can't hide from documentary evidence. Bank records don't have religious biases. Tax returns don't discriminate. FARA databases don't target Muslims. Vote tallies don't care about your identity. The evidence shows you took foreign money and acted as an unregistered foreign agent. That's not an attack on Muslims. That's enforcing federal law. I prosecuted terrorists when I was at the Department of Justice. Congresswoman, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, people who committed actual violence. I never once assumed someone was guilty because of their religion or background. I followed the evidence always. Only the evidence. And the evidence here shows you violated federal law, not because you're Muslim, but because you took foreign money and failed to register and voted as directed. Those are facts, not bias. Now, Congresswoman, you've sat here for over an hour listening to me present evidence. Let me give you a chance to respond. Cruz's tone shifted. This was Supreme Court advocate mode. Methodical, relentless. Let's start simple. Did you or did you not receive $247,500 from foreign government-funded entities between 2019 and 2021? I received consulting fees from various organizations. Yes. Did those organizations include Doha Policy Institute, funded by Qatar's government? They were one of several. Yes or no, Congresswoman? Yes. Did you receive $45,000 from them according to your amended disclosures? Yes. Did you initially fail to disclose that payment? Omar hesitated. There was an accounting error. Yes or no? Did you fail to disclose it in your original 2019 financial disclosure? Yes. Did you receive payments from Mediterranean Research Center funded by Turkey's government? Yes. 37 and 500? Yes. Failed to initially disclose? Yes. Cruz was building his record. Each admission documented. Justice and Development Foundation connected to Turkey's ruling party, $40,000? Yes. Failed to disclose? Yes. Atlantic Bridge Alliance, $55,000. Yes. Global Understanding Initiative, $70,000. Yes. So, we've established you received $247,500 from 5 entities funded by or tied to foreign governments. You failed to disclose any of these payments initially. Correct. The disclosures were corrected after you received a document preservation notice from this committee investigating foreign influence. Correct. The timing was coincidental. Yes or no, Congresswoman? Did you file amended disclosures 3 days after receiving our notice? Yes, but... Thank you. Now, did you register under the Foreign Agents Registration Act for any of these consulting arrangements? I wasn't required to. Yes or no? Did you register? No. Have you ever registered under FARA for any activity? No. Are you aware that providing consulting services for foreign government-funded entities while receiving payment requires FARA registration? My lawyers said, yes or no. Are you aware of FARA's requirements? Generally, yes. Did you consult with a FARA attorney before accepting these payments? Omar paused. I consulted with my personal attorney. Is your personal attorney a FARA specialist? I don't know. Did they specifically advise you that your activities were exempt from FARA? They said it was fine. Did they give you a written legal opinion stating your activities were exempt from FARA? Not written, but... So, no written opinion. Did they explain which exemption applied? They said members of Congress conducting official duties. Were these consulting arrangements part of your official congressional duties? They were related to policy. Yes or no? Were paid consultations with foreign-funded entities part of your official duties as described in House rules? Not technically, but... Thank you. So, you took $250,000 from foreign entities, never registered under FARA, had no written legal opinion supporting exemption, and these weren't official congressional duties. Correct. Senator, you're oversimplifying. I'm establishing facts, Congresswoman. Now, let's discuss your votes. Cruz pulled up the voting record. After Qatar's Doha Institute paid you $45,000, you voted against a resolution condemning Qatar's support for terrorism. Correct. That resolution was poorly written. Yes or no? You voted against it. Yes. But the substance, you were one of only 17 members to vote against it. Correct. Yes. After Turkey's entities paid you $7,500, you voted against sanctions on Turkey multiple times. Correct? Turkey is a NATO ally. Yes or no? You voted against Turkey sanctions. Yes. You refused to vote for the Armenian genocide resolution. Correct. I voted present because you refused to condemn Turkey's genocide of Armenians. Yes or no? I voted present, which meant refusing to condemn. Thank you. After the Global Understanding Initiative paid you $70,000, you voted against sanctions on Muslim Brotherhood-connected organizations. Correct. That's a mischaracterization. Yes or no? You voted against those sanctions. Yes. Cruz leaned back. So the pattern is clear. Foreign entities paid you. You voted exactly as they would want every single time. And you see nothing wrong with that. Those were my principled positions. Principled positions that happened to align perfectly with whoever was paying you. How convenient. When Ted Cruz finished his cross-examination, the hearing room was in chaos. Democrats trying to defend Omar, Republicans calling for criminal referral, media in absolute frenzy, cameras everywhere. But Omar sat frozen, her earlier defiance completely shattered. The Supreme Court advocate had done what he does best, built an airtight case with documentary evidence. No speculation, no conspiracy theories, just bank records, tax returns, vote tallies, and FARA database searches. All public record, all verifiable, all devastating. Chairman Durbin tried to restore order. The committee will take a 30-minute recess, but Cruz wasn't done. Mr. Chairman, before we recess, I move that this committee refer Representative Omar's conduct to the Department of Justice for investigation of potential FARA violations. I further move that we refer this matter to the House Ethics Committee for investigation of disclosure violations and potential corruption. And I move that we request the House leadership consider whether Representative Omar should retain any committee assignments pending a resolution of these investigations. The motions passed on party line votes. Republicans 11, Democrats 10. Within minutes, the footage exploded across every platform. Cruz destroys Omar trended at 25 million mentions. Agent Omar hit 18 million. Farah, forgotten by Omar, reached 12 million. But this wasn't typical partisan warfare. Something different was happening. Even mainstream media couldn't ignore the evidence. The bank records were real. The amended tax returns were filed. The Farah database was public. The vote correlation was mathematical. CNN. Omar's foreign payments raise serious legal questions. MSNBC. Progressive Congresswoman faces Farah investigation after Senate testimony. Even the New York Times. Representative Omar's undisclosed foreign income triggers calls for prosecution. The most devastating coverage came from legal experts across the political spectrum. Former federal prosecutors on CNN. If these facts are accurate, this is a textbook Farah violation. The Manafort case set the precedent. Omar's conduct appears even more serious because she was a sitting member of Congress, voting on legislation. Constitutional law professors. The Foreign Agents Registration Act exists precisely to prevent this type of foreign influence. If Omar received payments from foreign government entities and failed to register, that's a federal felony. Her position in Congress doesn't exempt her. It makes it worse. Even some progressives who'd supported Omar expressed concern. I want to believe Ilhan, but those bank records are real. The timing is suspicious. The vote correlation is hard to explain. This needs a full investigation. For the first time in her career, Omar couldn't control the narrative because Cruz hadn't attacked her identity. He'd presented evidence of crimes, and evidence doesn't care about your social media following. The consequences came swiftly, within 48 hours. First, the Department of Justice announced it was opening a formal investigation into potential Farah violations by Representative Omar. Second, the House Ethics Committee announced an investigation into disclosure violations and potential corruption. Third, House Democratic leadership quietly removed Omar from her remaining committee assignments pending resolution of ongoing investigations. Fourth, 3 major progressive organizations that had endorsed Omar issued statements calling for full transparency and cooperation with investigators. Fifth, the Minnesota Democratic Party called for Omar to address these serious allegations forthrightly. More devastating politically, Minnesota's 5th District saw 3 progressive primary challengers announce within a week. All emphasized integrity, transparency, and serving constituents, not foreign interests. Omar's approval rating in her own district dropped 23 points in 1 week. Her fundraising, which had always been strong, collapsed. Major donors pulled back pending investigation results. Even squad members were quiet. AOC tweeted general support, but avoided defending the specifics. Rashida Tlaib said nothing. They knew the evidence was too strong. Democratic leadership faced an impossible situation. Omar had been a rising progressive star, a symbol of diversity and new voices. Now she was a liability. Farah investigations, foreign money, vote corruption. Exactly the kind of scandal Democrats couldn't defend. And they knew if they defended her, Republicans would run ads. Democrats defend foreign influence in Congress. So they stayed quiet and let Omar twist in the wind. Within 2 weeks, leaked reports indicated the DOJ investigation was serious. Grand jury subpoenas, document requests, interviews with witnesses. Legal analysts noted, the evidence Cruz presented in the Senate hearing is admissible in federal court. Bank records, tax returns, vote records, all documentable. If DOJ pursues this, Omar's in serious trouble. For Ted Cruz, the hearing became a defining moment of his Senate career. He'd been a controversial figure. Conservatives loved him, Liberals hated him. He'd fought with his own party leadership. He'd led the 2013 government shutdown fight. But what he did in that hearing was different. He didn't grandstand. He didn't give speeches. He conducted a methodical cross-examination with documentary evidence. Even his critics acknowledged, whatever you think of Cruz politically, that was a masterful legal performance. He built a case like a prosecutor. Every question was designed to establish a fact. Every answer was documented. Legal scholars noted parallels to his Supreme Court arguments. The same preparation, the same precision, the same unwillingness to yield. Washington Post. Cruz's legal background evident in Omar cross-examination. The Atlantic. How a Supreme Court advocate exposes congressional corruption. Cruz's approval ratings jumped. Among Republicans, 89%, already high, slight increase. Among independents, 58%, up from 45%. Even among Democrats, 24%, up from 18%. More importantly, the hearing established a new standard. Foreign influence would be investigated based on evidence, not party loyalty. 3 months after the hearing, the Department of Justice announced criminal charges. United States versus Ilhan Omar. Count 1. Failure to register as a foreign agent under 22 U.S.C. Section 612. Count 2. Failure to file FARA registration statements under 22 U.S.C. Section 612. Count 3. Making false statements on congressional financial disclosures under 18 U.S.C. Section 1001. Each count carried up to 5 years in federal prison. The indictment was devastating. It incorporated almost everything Cruz had presented in the Senate hearing. The bank records, the timing, the vote correlation, the amended disclosures filed only after investigation began. Legal experts? This is a strong case. The Manafort precedent is clear. If Omar can't explain why she didn't register under FARA, she's looking at conviction. Omar maintained her innocence. Her lawyers argued congressional activity exemption. They claimed the payments were legitimate consulting fees, but the evidence was overwhelming. And worse, the progressive movement had moved on. They weren't defending her anymore. They were finding new heroes who weren't under federal indictment. 6 months after the hearing, facing a trial where conviction seemed likely, Omar reached a plea agreement. She pleaded guilty to 1 count of failure to register as a foreign agent. In exchange, the government dropped the false statements charges. Sentencing guideline: 18 to 24 months in federal prison. She announced she would not seek re-election in 2026. Her political career built on fighting corruption and speaking truth to power ended because she was caught taking foreign money. And it ended because she made one fatal mistake. She attacked Ted Cruz's Canadian birth and questioned his loyalty in a Senate hearing. Cruz, the Supreme Court advocate, who clerked for Chief Justice Rehnquist and argued before the highest court in America 9 times, responded the only way he knew how, with evidence. Documentary evidence, the kind that holds up in federal court. Bank records, tax returns, vote tallies, FARA databases. He built the case. He cross-examined the witness. He established the facts. And when a Supreme Court advocate builds a case with evidence, you don't walk away unscathed. You get destroyed. If you made it this far, you've witnessed legal excellence in action. You just watched a Supreme Court advocate, a man who clerked for Chief Justice Rehnquist and argued before the highest court in America 9 times, systematically destroy a congresswoman with documentary evidence. Bank records showing $250,000 from foreign governments. Tax returns showing she hid it for 3 years. FARA database showing she never registered. Vote records showing she supported whoever paid her. All documented, all proven, all devastating. Smash that like button if you think more politicians need to be held accountable with evidence. Subscribe because we're covering the federal trial and sentencing of Ilhan Omar. Share this everywhere before mainstream media tries to spin it away. Comment below. Should Omar resign before trial? Is FARA violation a serious crime or just a technicality? Were you surprised by the strength of Cruz's evidence? Who else needs this level of scrutiny? Turn on notifications because, when a Supreme Court advocate confronts a politician with documentary evidence, this is what accountability looks like. This story proves several critical things. 1. Social media activism means nothing when you're facing federal prosecution with documentary evidence. 2. You can't call someone a Canadian con artist when you're taking money from foreign governments yourself. 3. Constitutional lawyers who argued before the Supreme Court know how to build cases, real cases with real evidence. 4. The Foreign Agents Registration Act exists for a reason, to prevent exactly what Omar did. 5. When you question a prosecutor's loyalty, you better not have taken foreign money yourself. Ilhan Omar thought her squad allies would protect her, thought her progressive celebrity status was armor, thought attacking Cruz's Canadian birth would make her the victim. She was catastrophically wrong. Ted Cruz showed that when you attack someone with his legal credentials, Supreme Court clerk, Solicitor General, constitutional lawyer, 9-time Supreme Court advocate, you better have clean hands. Omar's hands, covered in foreign money she failed to disclose for 3 years. This is what happens when activism meets evidence. This is what happens when social media celebrity meets Supreme Court-level prosecution. This is what happens when someone who never tried a case attacks someone who argued before the highest court in America. God bless Supreme Court advocates who know how to build cases. God bless constitutional lawyers who follow evidence instead of politics. God bless everyone who believes foreign influence must be prosecuted equally, regardless of party or identity. Ilhan Omar learned the hardest lesson. When you've taken foreign money, failed to register as required by law, and voted as directed by whoever paid you, attacking a Supreme Court advocate is the worst strategy because he has the receipts. All of them.